The Glendale Road Church of Christ proudly presents a weekly exploration of the Word of our living God. This is It Is Written with Minister Jason Hart.
Well, the Winter Olympics have begun. It was enjoyable Friday night to watch the opening ceremonies. Of course, a lot of people were talking about the glitch that was in the opening ceremonies. Jennifer and I, we enjoy the Winter Olympics. I mean, we just enjoy the Olympics in general, and every 2 years we enjoy watching either the Winter or the Summer Olympics and watching the competitions. We were watching the opening ceremonies, and there was a spot during as some of the athletes were coming out. And you notice that there were a lot of countries that you probably never even heard of. And some of them had like 7 athletes. But then there were some other countries, they only had 1 athlete. And these were countries that were probably located near the equator. They have never seen snow in their life, yet they're competing in the Winter Olympics. And I remember there was one country, one athlete, he was there representing his country, and he was just running and dancing, and he was just excited to be at the Olympics. And I believe it was right about that time that one of the commentators mentioned that some of these athletes, if not most of these athletes, they know they're not going to win a medal. They're just glad to be here. You know, there's a little part of me that can't help but think, even though they cannot measure up to the times or measure up to that level of talent of some of the athletes, there's one of those guys that's just thinking, there's a good possibility that 7 people in front of me will be disqualified in the race that I'm in. And just by chance I could have the best race I've ever had before or the best performance I've ever had before. And I'll be able to come home with a gold or with a silver or with a bronze. And that has to be a dream in all of their minds. I can do this. On paper, in practice, it doesn't say that it's possible, but just perhaps it is possible. But even still, I kind of liked what the commentator said. Many of them know that they're not going to get a medal. They're just excited to be there. We hear an awful lot of talk about positive thinking. Being an encourager, being victorious in thought and in mind. But being positive in thought isn't just believing that you can be successful. Now, I think that in order to be successful, that you need to be positive, but to be victorious in everything, to be successful in everything is not the defining attribute of having a positive attitude. A person can have a positive attitude even in the face of defeat. A positive attitude even in the face of dire circumstances. A positive attitude even in the face of pessimism and negativity that surrounds them. And I realize that if we resort to our own thinking, our own knowledge, our own abilities, our own talents, that perhaps we won't always find that positive energy that should be within us. That's why we have to depend on God. That's why I want to encourage you to Not just to try to have a positive attitude, but to try to have a positive spiritual attitude. How do I know that something is spiritual, or how do I know something is of the world? Well, Paul gives us a wonderful answer. To me, it's the best way to describe the difference between the spiritual and what is of my life, what is of the flesh, what is of this world. It's found in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 18. If it can be seen, then it's temporal. If it's not seen, Paul says it's eternal. So the things that we cannot see, the love of God, the Word of God, the Spirit of God, our own souls, the grace of God, those are things that are long-standing. They are eternal. They're not here just for a moment and then to vanish away. And it's in those things that we find an incredible power and what should be an encouragement for our lives. Last week, we took a look at 5 suggestions of having a positive spiritual attitude. And I want us to take a look at another 5 this morning. We originally intended to take a look at these 5 last Sunday evening, but with the weather being as it was and so few people coming out and needing to abbreviate services, we didn't take a look at them. So we pushed those forward to this morning. If you look on your handout, you can find the answer for the first 5 from last week. And if you didn't pick up a handout, you can grab one on the way out. Matthew chapter 7 and verses 17 to 23, Jesus first began to talk to a large crowd of people, and then His disciples, as they went into the house together, they wanted to know from Jesus, please help us to understand what you're talking about. Now understand, Jesus was talking to a group of people who believed that eating certain foods would defile them. And of course, they were living under a testament, under a covenant that actually told them that. They had taken it to extremes, as we see so many times with the Pharisaical attitudes. They couldn't even sit down on couches that Gentiles had made unless they went through a thorough cleansing. So they were very concerned about what went inside of the stomach. And Jesus tells them, it's not about what goes into your stomach. It's about what is in your heart, what is in your mind. What is in your mind is very powerful, because it can defile you. And if the mind is that powerful, to lead you into sin, to lead you into a negative, sinful life, just imagine how powerful it can be when that mind is bolstered with positive spiritual thinking. Let's take a look at number 6. Believe that good things happen. Believe that good things happen. Do you believe that? That good things happen? Now, Paul tells us in Romans chapter 8 and verse 28 that all things work together for good for those who love God and who are the called according to His purposes. Now, we must admit not all things are great. But for those who have faith, we can believe that a greater good can accompany or come out of the most horrible circumstances. That's tough. I realize that. And some of the pains that you experience, I haven't even come close to being able to experiencing that. Some of the losses that you have experienced, whether it might be the life of someone or something that you love that may be of material or monetary value. I haven't experienced a loss like that. And even though I haven't experienced a loss like some of you have experienced, I understand, I still can get a glimpse and understand how difficult it is to believe that good things will happen. That something good will arise out of the darkest of circumstances. And that's why I have faith in God. I can't imagine living a life without that faith. I remember one of the most interesting things of looking into Psalm chapter 23. You know the statement, even though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death. Sometimes maybe we walk in fear of the shadow of the worst, the most unimaginable things, that we walk in the shadow of it. How is a shadow cast on anything? Now, how is a shadow cast upon your life? How is a shadow cast against a wall? Have you ever recognized it? If you have a flashlight, have you ever made a little finger puppet or not shadow puppets? How do you do that? You place an object in front of the light. So how is a shadow cast upon your life? Something comes between you and the light that is shining. If there is anything that we can learn from a shadow, is that the shadow is a reminder that the light is still there. And maybe it can be a reminder for us that even as we are experiencing the worst of circumstances in life, as that gloomy shadow is over us, if we see the shadow, the light is still there. Because the shadow can't exist without the light. Believe that good things happen. The light is still there. Number 7, daily renew the mind. The book of Lamentations, Jeremiah tells us that the love of God, the steadfast love of God, is new every single morning. I love that. You go back into 2 Corinthians chapter 4, once again, reminds us that even though our strength may be failing, even though our hearts may be weakened, our spirits can be renewed on a daily basis. Why is that? Because God's love is new every morning. Ephesians chapter 4 and verses 22 to 24. That you put off concerning the former conversation the old man which is corrupt according to deceitful lust, and that you be renewed in the spirit of your mind. And you might put on that new man which after God is created in righteousness and in true holiness. How is the new man put on? By the daily renewing of the mind. How do we do that? How do we renew the mind every single day of our lives? We say, well, we use study and we use prayer. Maybe we meditate, maybe we fast. How do we daily renew the mind, though? Have you ever given much thought to that? Have you ever thought about the idea that every single moment, every single breath that you breathe is a moment that has been granted to you by the grace of God? That God's love for you, and not just for you, but for the entire world, is so great that He is permitting another moment in time, another breath, another wink of the eye, another heartbeat, so that you could live and would live walking in His light. Every morning you get up, whether it is through meditation, whether it is through prayer, whether it is through study, do something to put your mind on things of above. That's what Colossians chapter 3 tells us. If you've been raised with Christ, keep seeking those things which are above. That's the idea in the original language there. Is don't seek the things that are above as if it's a long way off and it's just a slow climb trying to get there. No, what He's trying to tell you is you keep doing it as much as is possible. You keep seeking those things which are above. You seek them again. And when the next day comes, you seek them again. Keep seeking those things which are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Set your affection on things of above, not on things of the earth. That's the idea of looking to those things which are spiritual, not on the things that are temporal. So we renew our minds on a daily basis by continuing to look to God, to His love, to His grace, to His knowledge, His strength, His power. You can go through all the list of the attributes of God. You focus on those things and you do it on a daily basis. Number 8. Believe that God answers prayers. Do you believe this? I'm not asking you to raise your hand. Do you believe that God answers prayers? Yeah, some of you raised your hand anyway. That's okay. You know, sometimes I wonder about myself, and this is Jason Hart in self-examination. Do I believe more in the offering of a prayer than I believe in God's answering of the prayer? And perhaps maybe it comes down to participating in prayer so often in my life that if I'm not careful, then prayer becomes mundane. It becomes a repetitive practice. It becomes normal and something that is average to me. And so occasionally I have to change some wording in my prayer. I still address God. I still close in the Son's name. I still deal with some of the same subject matters. But I have to think about my prayers and sometimes practice and talk to God about new things. Might I encourage you that one of the best things that you can ever do for your prayer life is to practice. You know what you do if you were practicing for some sports team, some athletics, or if you were practicing on a talent? You know what you would do with that? You would do some research. You'd spend a little bit of time investigating different forms, checking on your fundamentals. Now, why can't we do that with our prayers? Listen intently and closely to some great prayer warriors. Feel from their inflection the emotion that they have toward God. Not asking for you to be unreal in your prayers, but to put more attention to your prayers, to liven them up in your heart. It doesn't have to become anything drastic, just some change in some words, some change in some thoughts. And I realize that for my life, that is something that can help me, and maybe it wouldn't be able to help you, but I want to encourage you to do that. Because it changes the inflection of your heart. The next time that you enter into prayer with God, say it with strength that you believe that He will answer this prayer. It might not be the answer you're looking for. Just as Jesus prayed unto God, not my will but yours be done. It might be exactly what you asked for, and we might be careful about the things that we ask. It might be a delayed, it might be that God's already said, I've already answered the prayer even before you uttered these words because I knew you were going to ask for it in the first place. Believe that God answers prayers. Number 9, have a good spirit image. This is something I've been working on. I'm trying to dedicate my mind more to thinking of me as a spiritual image rather than a self-image. Why take care of yourself? Because of the Spirit within you. Why be motivated? Not because of self, but because of the Spirit within me. Folks, we have been made in the image of God. If there is nothing else that you can possibly have to receive some motivation on a daily basis, it is to realize that as you look at yourself in the mirror, not just this outer being, but everything that you see within you, you have been made in the image of God. I remember many years ago going to different youth rallies. About once a year, you'd always hear somebody say, don't be as concerned with who you are as much as whose you are. I like that. And that stuck with me all of these years. Yes, I want to be concerned about myself. And the Bible even permits me to be concerned about myself. After all, wasn't it Jesus that said, love your neighbor as what? As yourself. Paul told the Philippians, work out your own salvation. Philippians chapter 2, in talking about unity, he even tells us, look not only to your own interest, but also for the interest of others. God wants us to be concerned about ourselves. He wants us to be concerned about our individual relationship with God. But as I think about my motivation, as I think about my esteem, as I think about my future in the relationship with God, I don't want it to be self. I want it to be Spirit-filled. Because it's not Jason Hart that reigns in here, it's God who reigns in here. Number 10, live one day at a time. Matthew chapter 6 and verses 32 to 34, Jesus talked about the Gentiles. Don't do as they do. They're worried about where they'll eat, and where they'll sleep, and what all they'll have to wear. He tells his audience, Don't be anxious about tomorrow. Tomorrow will be anxious for itself. And Jesus would also teach us to be concerned about our future, but the encouragement here, don't be anxious. Don't be worried about tomorrow. Live in the presence and the blessings of God right now. Stop fretting over the past. Stop worrying about the past. Stop beating yourself up over the past. Stop worrying about the future. And live in the spotlight of the present. Your life is so overwhelmed and so flooded with the blessings of God, not to just try and soak it in right at this moment. The story was told about Robert E. Lee. There was a lady in Virginia who had invited her out to her house. This was after the Civil War had come to a close. She invited him to her backyard, and there she showed him a very old and aged tree, what it once was a beautiful tree. But now it had become mangled and scarred and limbs broken off. We've seen a few limbs broken off in our neck of the woods here lately. She turned to Robert E. Lee and she said, "Would you look what those Union soldiers did to my tree?" Robert E. Lee looked at her and said, "Cut it down, madam, and forget it. Just cut it down and forget it." I told her, you need to take some action. As long as you see this tree, you're going to continue to harbor ill will. But you need to move on beyond this. As possible for any of our lives today, any one of you, that you're clinging to some grudge in the past, some mistake in the past, some problem in the past, some sin in the past, cut it down and forget it. The memory will be there as a help aid, but cut it down and forget it. Live now in the presence, under the grace and the blessings of God, and look forward to a brighter future ahead of you, not one that is filled with anxiety or worry. And continue to look to God for guidance, that you might have that positive spiritual attitude. This morning, as we sing the song of invitation, perhaps this is an opportunity for some of you to make a change in the way that you think. Perhaps you need us to pray for you, and we want to pray for you. And we want to help you along the way. If that's your desire, our encouragement is for you to come forward as we sing that song and sit down on one of these pews and talk to me, talk to the elders. There are a few elders that will be standing in the back. You can go and go to a room all by yourselves. And together you can study together and you can pray together. It could be that in your studies you have come to the point that you say, yes, I believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and I want to be baptized so that my sins will be washed away. I want to die to the old life so that I might live unto the new one. You can come forward while we sing that song as well. If there's anything we can do, please come.
This has been It Is Written, presented by the Glendale Road Church of Christ. We welcome your visits and communications at any time.
one with God's own heart. Oh, let the ancient words impart.